Hello, everybody. My name is Pam Bro, and I am the president and CEO, as Suzanne mentioned, of the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. I am a female with curly dark brown hair and tan colored skin. Today, I'm wearing a blue dress, and behind me, you may be able to see that there's a bookcase, 2 chairs, and 3 photographs on the wall. Most importantly, I am excited to be with you today. Thanks so much to Suzanne and the entire team at the Nebraska Arts Council for this invitation to your statewide arts conference and for your kind assistance in helping to prepare me. I'd also like to add a special thanks to Suzanne, who's balancing her important leadership role in Nebraska alongside chairing the board of my organization. So NASA. Ours is the place where state and jurisdictional arts agencies work together to advance the arts and creativity across the country. And so through Suzanne, Nebraska and our entire assembly are very well represented on the national scene. And thanks so much, Suzanne, for your service there. I was thrilled to hear that the Nebraska conference is focused on community engagement. It's a topic that means a lot to me personally, and frankly, it's the reason I even entered the arts administration field almost 30 years ago, and it certainly still fuels my work today. By the way, congratulations on Nebraska's new Creative Districts program. What a wonderful compliment it will be to deepening community engagement, right? Whether your vantage point is from an arts organization, as an artist, or as representatives from city and county governments. Creative district work often provides a remarkable opportunity for community members to see their communities with fresh eyes, eyes wider open to see and experience creative assets and engage in opportunities they may not have noticed before, right? And this work is also really fertile ground for new opportunities. It's a real gift. That's been my experience with creative districts, and I'm sure it's one you'll come to appreciate deeply. I also understand that your conference has emphasized diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and certainly we all appreciate how important these principles are as we work to advance them. The beauty of this conference, with community engagement at its core, is that learning about community engagement and then animating what you learn in your daily work will help you build the much needed muscle for what I'll call inclusive excellence, right? What you've learned about community engagement and how you put it into practice will help you advance, for instance, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And it'll help you advance the Creative Districts program. So there's real power in a conference that layers these ideas together. And I hope the experience has been gainful as well as inspirational for you. But I'd like to begin this segment by envisioning community engagement. I question, what does it look like? Where are you in community engagement? Is this a journey you're on? And if it is, where are you on this journey? What does it look like when you've arrived? Certainly, relationship development is critical to engaging communities, especially communities you haven't engaged before. But what does this kind of relationship development actually look like? At this point, posing these questions likely has not helped you to visualize where community engagement can take you. And being able to visualize this concept does help me, and I'm hopeful it'll be productive for you too. And so fortunately, to help us visualize it, I brought some help. About 3 states to your east, over in Indiana, the State Arts Agency team developed a community engagement ladder, and I'll use it to help illustrate the spectrum of community engagement activity and potential, especially as it's related to the arts. So if we could advance to slide number 2, it's the beginning of the ladder. I'm confident you'll see that this is a nice relationship building tool because it helps you visualize what it means to build and deepen authentic relationships within a community. The ladder can help you identify where you are now or where your organization is now It can help you identify where you want to go and what it looks like when you get there. Also, when you hear the word community throughout, I encourage you to think about community through the lens that every community contains smaller communities within it, right? And so if you're from an organization, you may experience high engagement with some parts of your community, but that might not be the case with other parts. So here, you'll see that the first rung on the ladder, on the community engagement ladder, is your arts opportunities are available to the community. What does that look like? This rung will sound very familiar to many of you. On this rung, you develop arts and cultural activities and programs and events that you believe are relevant to the community. Most often, even though you haven't really gotten their ideas or input or feedback to develop these programs, it doesn't mean they're not good programs. You know, on this rung, your work is in earnest, but the community isn't involved in your planning process. But the community does acknowledge that the opportunity to attend your events, right, or participate in your activities, it exists. They know it. They know you're here. On this rung of the ladder, there's no consistent involvement between the arts provider and the community. The community may not see the arts as relevant or vital to their quality of life. So, but they know you're there, right? And that's certainly an important start. If we could advance to the third slide, please. The second rung on the ladder is you seek to involve the community. You want to better understand what the community itself finds relevant or needs. You start conversations with individuals or organizations from the community. Perhaps you even send out surveys. You develop outreach activities that take your arts programs into the community, to schools, retirement homes, hospitals, right? I'm sure this rung of the ladder sounds really familiar. A lot of good work is happening at this level. Here, we also see some one-time or short-term collaborations, right? And those collaborations expand our audiences, right? So think partnering with another arts organization to produce a concert in the park, right? A standalone kind of event. So let's advance to slide number 4, please, to the third rung on the ladder, which is you develop intentional collaborations with the community. You form strategic partnerships that are long-lasting. Your partnerships become more than a standalone programmatic collaboration, right? More than a one-off. You develop deeper relationships with the community. Here, you can even find some common ground and begin to build trust within the community. In return, the community sees your work as meaningful to their quality of life. That's great, right? As our community engagement practices have evolved in the arts, getting here demonstrates that you've done great work and the community appreciates it and they see its value. So congratulations on arriving here, all of us, right? Because it doesn't happen by accident, and it certainly takes dedicated attention and action. And yet the journey continues. You know, here's the news flash, and as you can see, we've just passed the halfway mark on the community engagement ladder. So if you could please advance the slide to slide 5. And here we have the fourth rung on the ladder. You have established a lasting relationship with the community. What a beautiful place for any arts organization to be, right? You enjoy a substantial, sustainable relationship with the community, and the community is proud of that relationship. You are responding to community needs, and the community responds to you. What I mean here is your programs meet needs of the community, and the community wants to be a part of them. At this level, your programming and activities directly reflect community involvement in your planning, in program participation, and in your evaluation of those programs, right? This is a deeper connection to community, deeper engagement in your work. Let's advance to slide 6. So, and finally, the 5th rung on the ladder is your work in the arts is central to the community. You are asked to the table to help address the community's critical issues and opportunities. There is improved understanding of the intersections between your organization, the arts in general, and other sectors, right? Like other nonprofits or for-profits or government agencies. You recognize your unique role in meeting community needs. And the community seeks you out and advocates for you because they believe you are essential, you're relevant, and you are vital to their quality of life. Realizing your own mission within this community context, you increase your opportunities to contribute to public benefit. Advance to slide 7, please. And I hardly have to say, that's a beautiful place to make art in, right? And present art. It's a powerful place to engage in the work. And through the lens of community engagement and through the lenses of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, can you begin to imagine what you and the community can accomplish together with a relationship that continues to deepen? I would encourage you to consider where you are or where your organization is on the community engagement ladder. I think it's important when they take that look to be really honest with where you may be. I believe that most of our field nationally has done very good work in the arts on rungs 1 and rung 2, 1 and 2. Some organizations, of course, are working on rung 3 or beyond. This work is evolving and our field is evolving, right? It's an evolution and a maturation. Our definitions of community engagement today are different than they once were. They're deeper. What's important here is to understand where you are today in terms of community engagement, and with eyes wide open, consider where you want your work to go. Also ask yourself how you'll maintain success once you've arrived at whatever destination that you want to get to is on the on the engagement ladder. So nurturing the relationships that got you there can't be forgotten when you're where you want to be, right? Especially if you want to continue to reap good rewards for the community and good rewards for the arts and your arts organization in particular. I'd also like to share with you a few ideas to consider as you're building the relationships, as you more deeply engage in new communities or any of the communities that surround you. Just a few ideas. First, please keep in mind that in this work, there's no such thing as the general public, sort of quote unquote, the general public. We use that term a lot across the country and for many purposes. And I think perhaps we use it a little too often. In community engagement, you really must know who your community is or who your communities within the community are, right? What are the demographics? Who are your stakeholders? What are the networks? Who are the community champions? Who are the movers and shakers? Answering these questions help to build a foundation for really moving community engagement forward, right? So, for example, who gets things done within the communities I wish to engage? Now, that's always an important question, and it should be an early question. Here's an example. I have been involved in a rural development effort in South Carolina, where the state arts agency made a commitment to work within about half a dozen counties that were not benefiting from their services. Well, their first order of business was to go to the communities, experience them, connect to people there, and learn about the communities from the people who live there, and also discover who gets things done there. In South Carolina, those community-based movers and shakers, those doers from across those counties are now called community mavens, and they lead what we now know as a program called The Art of Community, rural South Carolina. And they do that work in partnership with the State Arts Agency, with support from them, and in partnership with a number of stakeholders. So through the arts, the Mavens are engaging their communities, building new community-based teams, and leading vital community advancement. Engagement strategies by the Arts Council, in that case, have been really authentic. They've been respectful of the communities themselves. The approach has not been top-down, and their ongoing partnerships continue to create opportunities for the counties. Here's another idea I'd like to share. In collaboration with a community, be the co-author of action, not the sole author of it. That's really a part of authentic relationship building, and co-authoring ideas and action can lead to a really profound connection. I recall an example of this from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, when the State Museum reinvented how it works with community. The museum set out to elevate and exhibit the historic and cultural richness of an African-American neighborhood. The neighborhood's called Old South Baton Rouge. The neighborhood was an important hub of African-American life in the capital city, but it had suffered from years of disinvestment. Well, the project came alive when people from the community co-authored the entire project, from the exhibit to several community gatherings related to the exhibit, gatherings the museum hadn't even envisioned on its own. The community really helped to drive how they would benefit from the exhibit, right? So this kind of co-authorship jump-started a relationship between the neighborhood and the museum that grew as a result of that authentic interaction, right? They co-conceiving and co-authoring action together. They shared a sense of purpose, and they shared a sense of ownership. And so that's really deep engagement. Also, sharing resources, support, and action can be important in building relationships and heightening engagement. So I would encourage you to be purposeful and be generous in the way you work with communities. Now, I say be generous. It doesn't mean you have to write a big check. Most of us couldn't do that anyway. But when building a relationship with a new community partner, there are many ways to consider generosity, many ways to consider lightening the load of their burdens in pursuit of the project or in pursuit of the goal. And generosity can be simple, right? Sharing a copier or sharing space, for example, can lighten the load. And I think you'll find that many communities will respond in kind, right? Generosity is important in community engagement, and it's powerful. Just as powerful, sharing power. Sharing power can also transform your relationship with communities and really advance engagement. This is true at the office, just as it's true in communities, right? If you're writing all the rules, right? If you are writing all the rules, then naturally engagement from others won't be as deep. I share this idea understanding that power sharing can be inherently uncomfortable space. Sharing power means giving up some power. And that's not a muscle we always know how to work, right? If power sharing is a muscle, it's one we often forget to work out when we're exercising. So let's think about some examples of power sharing in action, right? If you're a local arts funder, for example, how might you share power? How about offering up your grant guidelines for discussion, feedback, and even editing by members of the communities you want to serve? Who better than them to express how your funds can help them and how your processes can be reimagined to reduce barriers to their participation, right? How might an individual artist working in a community share power? How about sharing creative control of a project with artists from that community, or co-creating the art with community? How about power sharing or sharing power with colleagues at the office, right? Maybe, let's see, there's an occasion where you need more hands on deck because of a large project that you're working on and colleagues offer to help? Do you ask them to take every step exactly the way you would? Or do you provide space for them to accomplish the goal in the way that's most comfortable or interesting for them? I think it's also important to think about how we gather with communities. I think we all have a tendency to default to meetings, right? And these days they're all Zoom meetings, especially once this pandemic is in check. Resolve to be newly creative about how you gather with community partners. Meetings are important, but they're just one way of gathering with people, right? And exchanging information. Create a multitude of ways to get people involved with your organization. Hands-on activities, a river cleanup, a park cleanup, a playground build. These kinds of activities get people working side by side, sharing an experience, meeting, speaking with one another, and telling their stories, right? That's relationship building. And it's even an information exchange, just different than we might otherwise plan. And as you prepare to gather, it's also important to identify who's not represented, right? Or who's underrepresented at your events or meetings, right? In your portfolio of work. Be purposeful about that so you can be purposeful about seeking their involvement. Even attendance, when I think about attendance at meetings or events, I try to put myself in other people's shoes. What factors, aside from meeting content, right, or event content, what factors would heighten or guarantee someone else's attendance? How might I eliminate common barriers to showing up? You can certainly be thoughtful about location, right? Can everyone get there easily via public transit, especially by bus? Is the location neutral, right? Or is it known to be the turf of a particular group? Is the venue familiar to the community and accessible to everyone involved? And when we're gathering people and we intend to hear from them, let's not solicit input from folks if there's no real opportunity for them to influence a decision, right? That's an engagement killer. Also, at the beginning of a gathering, taking time to establish rules of engagement, or in meetings, we call them meeting norms, right? Sourced from the people in the room. You build ownership of the process from the beginning, right? You warm up the room and you warm up the voices within the room, right? You establish shared culture and norms regarding your expectations, everybody's expectations, really, for participation. Getting the group on the same shared page from the beginning of a conversation. And also, when you invest time in building relationships with grassroots community leaders and you're bringing folks together, then publicly acknowledge their time and their efforts very explicitly. It's important to acknowledge them, and frankly, the community that they come from needs to experience that respect being paid to its leaders. Now, depending upon the community you are connecting to, addressing language barriers at events or meetings is particularly important, right? And even the use of technical jargon, right? Eliminating technical jargon and acronyms wherever you can help more people be on board and stay with the conversation. Certainly, I know sometimes we need the jargon, but when we do, let's define those. Let's put it on a whiteboard. Let's keep it concise so that it's easy to grasp and connect to. Certainly, when we think of language and communication, dedicating funds for your meetings and your projects to include interpretation and translation really needs to be a part of community engagement. And of course, listening more than we speak is always critical as we're building relationship and seeking perspectives and expertise and the lived experiences of the community members we seek to connect to. Right? There are also some areas of connection that can be a bit difficult from the start, right? If there's citizen distrust reflective of some past issue, right? Whatever the reason. I would encourage you to consider verbally and publicly acknowledging it. If historically, for instance, your organization's patterns of decision-making didn't really reflect gathering input from the community in the past, you can name that. You can name it and you can own it. You might begin by saying something like, in the past, we've planned our own programming. We did that internally, and we really seek to be better community partners and really more responsive to you. We want to be in this together. By doing so, you can set a tone for open conversation, right? And you demonstrate you're willing to engage honestly and collaboratively. And, just putting the past out there, if there is a past to grapple with, can be really helpful, can be a door opener. Also, on the side of, when things go wrong, we're human and our work goes awry sometimes. In the community engagement context, we should always be willing to make it right when something goes wrong. When receiving feedback about a meeting or an event or something said or unsaid, be gracious, validate the concerns of the messenger, and really make a verbal correction or acknowledgement in real time. I know I've had to do this sometimes in uncomfortable situations, but really validating the concern and then acknowledging the need for correction, that opened a door or kept a door open, which was really important for me. And I know it can be important in a lot of situations. There's another sort of sometimes difficult area in community engagement. It's not uncommon for organizations, especially predominantly white organizations, to want to engage communities of color, right? For all the right reasons and all good intentions. Developing and deepening these relationships takes time, right? As I know you realize, you can develop them at the speed of the trust building. But here's one thing you may not have considered in this particular space. As an organization especially, don't automatically expect your colleagues of color to lead this work. Now, I realize this is a big statement and probably an interesting statement coming from me because I am a woman of color who leads an organization and I lead its diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I choose to do so and I love doing it. But there are reasons you shouldn't assume your colleagues of color must be the folks to lead these efforts. People of color, and the same is true for women sometimes. Sometimes they're criticized within organizations and around organizations for leading diversity and equity efforts because they can appear to be self-serving in promotion of their own groups, right? This is documented. It's especially documented in corporate America, right? And these paradigms don't create the safest environment for them to step up and lead the work. Also, when you think about it, is it fair to ask them, let's say you have a colleague of color, is it really fair to ask them to solve an organization's quote unquote diversity problem? It's also important to realize that they can exist easily between the proverbial rock and a hard place in managing the relationship between a community and your organization, and that their community credibility can be on the line, right? Especially if there's a perception that the organization isn't living up to its promise, right? And so I just ask you to please keep this in mind when you consider who should lead the work of engaging communities of color, if in fact it is your goal to engage a particular community of color. It doesn't mean your colleagues of color can't help, or it doesn't even mean they shouldn't lead these efforts. Some will really want to. And when that's the case, I would suggest you just remember to take really good care of them along the journey, because it's a difficult one, having to manage expectations on both sides, right? Being loyal to the organization and sometimes being a member of the community. So take good care of them. And finally, when working to really engage a group or a community of any size, there are some really simple questions that I'd recommend asking of yourselves. I ask them of myself. First, when sharing information with a community or frankly, a partner of any kind, is the information sharing a one-way street or a two-way street? Because sharing information should work both ways if we want to heighten community engagement. Is there a real consultation happening, right? Am I actively seeking and considering the views of others? Are we planning together? Because is the very planning a collaborative venture? It should be, right? In community engagement. Are we acting together? Is the community partner? Is the community or is the partner deeply involved in implementation of the work, right? Are our activities community directed? Has the community itself participated in identifying issues and solutions? These questions help me all the time, and I hope they can help you too. And so if we could please advance to the final slide. I would like to end by saying this work takes time, and it is so well worth the time. It also takes courage, and choosing courage usually requires risks. That's why we don't often choose courageous routes, it's for that reason, the risk. Courage isn't a rare character trait that we're born with. I absolutely was not born with it. I know that for sure. But I think that courage is developed through practice. It's a skill to develop. It's a muscle to strengthen. I know I have to practice it. I think the muscles for building courage strengthen through practice and through incorporating that practice into our everyday lives. And so take a look at this little guy. I love him. Admittedly, I'm obsessed with him. And if he can take that leap, then surely I can summon my courage to help navigate the tougher moments as I continue the important course toward heightened community engagement. And I'm absolutely certain you can summon your courage too. So thanks for your time today, everybody. And I wish you a weekend filled with relaxation, fun, and peaceful moments. Thanks.